Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We got a special guest in the building, the godfather of my children. This is one I've been excited for. A childhood friend. I've had Mother Goose on multiple times. I've had Poppy Goose, but we've never had the Godfather, aka Michael, to come on the show. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here. Been following you for a long time as you've been through this journey, and didn't know when exactly I'd be on here, but I'm excited we're finally able to do this. So
you've known me we've known each other for. I'm 30. You're 34. I'm 33. What'd you say? 30 years? Maybe close to that.
27, maybe. I think we met in
first grade,
maybe, or tail end of first grade.
So to say that we've known each other a long time it's
an understatement.
Yeah. So you said something interesting a little while back. You know, we kind of talked. You kind of knew I was doing the YouTube thing. You started a YouTube channel. And you know, I kind of went down the comics rabbit hole, and you kind of said, dude, I didn't know that you were kind of into this stuff.
Yeah.
And, I wasn't, was I? I mean, I really wasn't into that space.
I mean, not that I knew of. I mean, like when we were growing up, you were definitely like always into different things, right? Like I remember growing up, you had like different Legos. Like I think you had like a pod racer one, right? And we were always into games, and like you really liked Lord of the Rings, different things like that. So you definitely always had it in you. And I think, you know, after you kind of moved back, don't know where we're going with locations and all that, but once you
West by God, Virginia.
Yeah, well, once you moved back here, right? I remember when you first kind of moved in here, when we hung out a little bit. I remember you had gotten into like I don't know what to call it, like figurines maybe? Or like
statues?
Yeah, like you had models and you were painting them, and like I didn't know that you had done that, but like that was cool.
Warhammer miniatures.
Yeah, like you had that. So like, I mean this in the best way possible. You've always been kind of into like nerdy stuff, and I am too, right? No shame. But no, like I had no idea that you were like into comic books. Like when you started the channel and you were doing all this, I was just like, how have I known you for this long? And like I didn't know that this was like a thing, you know? Because like when you first started showing me it, it wasn't like, oh, hey, I got a couple comic books and this is cool. Like, you had a collection. I'm like, where did this come from?
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of who I am. I realized that, you know, I can't just have, like, a few comics. Yeah. I have to, like, start a YouTube channel and, like, have whatever the hell we got down here going. I mean, that's who I am, my personality. You probably somebody with a little bit more moderation in your life.
Maybe. I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like yeah.
I feel like you could get like a few comics and be okay.
Maybe. I think we all have like our things though, right? Like I think for you, that's just you're a passionate person. You know, when you do something, you like to do it like with intensity in a good way. You know what I mean? Like you get into stuff for sure.
There's no doubt. And I think I've always been a collector of things.
Oh yeah.
I remember collecting like. Definitely action figures and stuff. I remember you letting me borrow. I had like the Megazord, and you had like the tiger, the white
the white tiger
Power Zord.
Rangers?
Yeah, and then I wanted to fuse them into the whatever Zord, and you let me borrow a toy.
Oh man!
And like, I mean, that was like a big deal. Like to let somebody borrow a big toy like that, and you let that happen.
We were friends, man. I'm glad I didn't remember that until just now.
Yeah,
but those are good memories.
You know, I had to like, and I mean, you know, it was like one of those moments of like, I had to return this thing. I wasn't going to be the kid that just, oh, let me borrow that and then never send it back.
We may not have been friends if you had done that.
No.
You know.
So, did you ever have any collections or anything? Did you ever collect
like growing up,
or just or ever?
Yeah. I mean, not probably to the extent that you do, but I mean, when I was a kid, I was really into like my soccer stuff. So anything soccer, whether it was the like jerseys or the trophies and things like that, that was a big thing. I got into coin collecting like very loosely for a little bit, like when the state quarters were coming out. Like, you know what I mean? That was like obviously cheesy, right? Like it's like probably the easiest thing that you could do. But like every year when like the new 5 would come out, my mom would get me like the little case of them in there, and like nice. Whenever I'd get like nothing like rare, right? Like nothing where it's like, oh, this was a 1 of 25 coins minted in Denver, and this one year, nothing like that. But like whenever I'd get like a random like silver dollar or something that was older, I'd find a penny that was from like 1920, but this is cool, and I would keep it. So for a little bit, I did that.
You don't have any like gold eagles?
Nah, no,
Okay.
nothing like that now. That was when I was younger. I didn't keep it going so much, but
Dude, I could see you going down that route of like being like a stacker where you have like just ounces of gold.
hey, if I had ounces of gold, that'd be pretty cool.
Dude, we bought a couple quarter ounces of those eagles.
Oh yeah,
and I'm like looking at that gold, and I'm like, God, I don't need another freaking hobby. But comic books are just way cooler to me than like a quarter ounce of gold. I mean, this is so much cooler. Obviously, you're not somebody that is super aware of comics. You're not somebody that's super into this. Obviously, you know superheroes.
Sure.
You've watched the movies. When you see this stuff, does anything register? Like, do you feel anything?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a mixture because a lot of the things that you have, I do recognize. You know,
Right.
the classic superheroes or things from like the X-Men universe, right? Like all of that, totally recognize. But then you also have some different things that I've never seen before. So with the things I haven't seen before, it's always just like, wow, like it's this sense of exploration. I've never seen it before. It's kind of interesting, and I'm always curious about the story, right? Like, is this something that you got into because you really love the story, or is it something that you found because it's like rare as a collector's item or whatever? So for me, I'm always fascinated from that side of it. And then with the characters that I am familiar with, for me, it's a mixture of almost like nostalgia and appreciation. Because when I look at, a book like that, for example, I'm guessing, you'd have to, tell me for sure, but I'm guessing most of these were illustrated more by hand, before
Yes.
there was all like the computer design, right?
Yeah.
And someone was always coming up with a story plot or something for the character, and they're probably trying to do stories that were inspirational to young people at the time, and just
a lot of them was for kids,
right? And just the creativity that they came up with. A lot of times now, I feel like you see a lot of things that are recycled ideas or repeats or variations of it, and I feel like so much of what was going on in that era where there's all this creation was pure creativity. So I have this sense of nostalgia, appreciation, and also almost like fascination, for what people were able to do with so much maybe less technology than we have today. So I guess that's kind of my initial take on all of that.
That's a very I was not expecting you to say that. That makes me appreciate. I really appreciate you saying those things, because that's what's really drawn me into this and kept me going. Comic books are something that I didn't know that I wanted in my life. It is a perfect form of collecting, in my opinion, because it's the story, which you've nailed it. It's the rarity, it's the scarcity, it's the it's the piece of history that you're holding. That's really what's captivated me. But the primary thing has been the stories. Like if I hadn't had bought these these big tomes of stories, and I hadn't read those, I wouldn't have gotten to this point with all this collection.
Right.
And is that something that you would ever dabble in, reading a comic book run or
I think
a
so.
graphic novel?
I think so. I think you have to find something that interests you, obviously. Me personally, I'm not like, I don't know, when you say graphic novel, I'm not someone that's into like super gory stuff or like super graphic things, so that might be tougher for me. But like anything that you can sink into a good story where there's character development, or someone's trying to sort of save the day with something that's cool, like, of course we all want that.
So comic books, like, I thought that they were all just like boom pow, like superhero saves the day.
Okay, right.
And it's so much more than that. Any big movie, any superhero movie you've seen, and many other movies that you've seen, they've drawn from comic books.
Right.
And the source material, like, a novel is always better than the movie a majority of the time.
Most of the time, yeah.
And these stories are, I know you don't like the gory stuff, but there are these stories that are just thought expanding. There are so many things that I have learned about myself and others and the world and psychology, and just from these books that I didn't think that I would. And I mean, I have a few comics that I want you to read.
Okay.
Like I would wish you would read.
Okay.
But I was just wanting to pick your brain as to, what if anything interests you, and so that
Sure.
kind of explains that.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
I don't want to stop your thought, but
No, go ahead.
This is coming from someone who's relatively ignorant on the comic book scene and everything like that. Like, I'm not an expert at this. Your audience probably knows a lot more, but
No, my audience knows more than me.
But yeah, maybe. But for me,
They do.
I don't know that I had the same image that it would be like Bam or Kapow, necessarily, at least with some of the more modern ones. But I am sort of surprised to hear you when you describe how much depth there is in some of these plots.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, when you sort of compare maybe the writing style or the depth that the story and character development goes into, maybe with, I don't know, modern movies or what else might be out there, cartoons or anime or whatever it might be, do you think that there's a general lack of awareness from the general population maybe as to how deep comics may go? Because when you're telling me that, I'm like surprised in a pleasant way, right? It's like I'm actually like, oh wow, I didn't realize that. Maybe like you said, you have books that you recommend that I read, and it's like, okay, I'm actually kind of intrigued now to learn more about what it is that you're describing.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I think that's why comics have not gotten bigger. I think it's a lack of awareness.
Okay.
That it's a children's medium, or it's something for
like juvenile, maybe.
Yeah, juvenile or nerds that are they're looking for a power fantasy, or
Okay.
or people that just want to have escapism.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so much more than that. Like, so many of these stories I've read are better than so many novels that I've read, and it's like this perfect blend. Like the image, the art. If you have an appreciation for art, you will enjoy comics even more, because not only is it the storytelling, but these artists are painting you a picture in certain circumstances, literally, of like putting you in this place. So when you read a novel, like, you're having to use your imagination to fill in what this place is. With the comic book, you taking that out,
Right.
and you're focusing on narrative. You're focusing on storytelling, and less about scenery and surroundings.
Right. This.
And which I love, because I love movies. I love animation, not as much as movies.
Sure.
But it's like, that's why I think more people should get into comics, because you take out the barrier of entry of a novel is so much higher than a comic book. Because you have to get your mind right. You have to almost kind of train your brain to get into the novel space, because you're having to you have to put that picture in your mind.
Is this maybe a decent metaphor? I don't know if this would apply, but recently I've been getting into like motorcycle racing a little bit, like dirt bike racing.
Brat.
Yeah. So I was watching a race. I think it was at Southwick, and it was interesting. As I was watching like the live commentary, I felt like something was like kind of off a little bit, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Like, the announcers were really putting as much as they could into it, and then it dawned on me. I think they may have been having an issue with the microphone, but like there was no sounds coming from the track, no horns from the crowd, no sound of engines, no like background music. Right? It was just kind of these guys talking with stuff moving.
Right.
So like when you're talking about like the comparison between like the comic book and whether it be novels, movies, whatever it may be, I think in a movie, right, you have background music that can start playing. You can have the scenery, you can have lighting, whatever it may be.
Yep.
And I think part of what you're sort of describing to me, or what I'm taking away from it, is that appreciation where you don't necessarily have all those things given to you, right? And that's the challenge in the illustrations and the writing of the story.
Yes.
That sort of gives it that depth, right? And I don't know if it's the challenge or the artistry, whatever you want to call it, but for the illustrators, the people that are writing it, that's sort of where not just the creativity, but the excellence comes in. Is that maybe a good metaphor to kind of...
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think movies, I don't know if you're familiar with A24 movies. They all kind of fit this mold of lighting. There's a sense of imagery that they're going for. And great comic artists can capture that. Some of my favorite runs of all time are Walking Dead, The Preacher, Sandman, a Swamp Thing, these artists put you in that place. Like when I make videos when I'm going to a convention or I'm going to a comic shop and I have no audio of the place, like me sifting through the books or me talking to the individuals there, there's a little bit taken away from the viewer because they are just listening to my voice narrate it. And I think you're describing exactly what I think people want, and especially what makes comics so special is it sets the scene.
Yeah. Do you think there's also some magic maybe in the comic books where I know that there's the illustrations, but in a movie, for example, you have all this stuff given to you?
Yes.
Do you think with the comic book, as you're reading them, right, you sort of get to fill in some of that, you get to use some of your own creativity in that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially the voices, especially, if you watch, take for example, like Captain America, Steve Rogers. Like, can you separate Chris Evans, the person?
I was just thinking that same thing.
Steve Rogers.
I've been so inundated by what the, modern movie scene might be, right, with something like that, that I almost feel robbed of the opportunity of kind of coming up with what I think in my own head, right?
Yes.
If that makes sense, yeah.
So this is a perfect example. Okay. So you've got Thor, Silver Surfer.
Yep.
Silver Surfer, we had him in a Fantastic Four movie, but the movie was shit, pretty much. This, when you're reading Thor, I'm not reading this as Chris Hemsworth is in my book. Thor is Thor in this book. Silver Surfer is Silver Surfer in this book. They're not in my voice, but a great story, the author, I can hear them putting a voice to this character. And when he's talking to Jane Foster, or he's fighting Gore the God Butcher, I can hear Gore the God Butcher. I can hear Thor. And the
intonation, the flow, all that sort of thing.
A great writer doesn't inject himself, which has been a big issue with modern comics and modern stuff, where it's an agenda. They're trying to do something to push something else. A great writer can just you feel the character. You don't feel the writer.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. It's almost being lost in the universe, not being lost in one person's head, maybe.
Yes.
If you will, yeah.
Yeah. And there's some serious escapism in comic books that, video games do that as well, but like you can only do so much with a narrative in video games.
Yeah.
Comic books, you're not looking at video, but the pictures in that story are enough that you're lost in this thing.
It's fascinating talking to you about this. Like, I'm a little bit of a nerd. Like, I get into the whole psychology and mental development of things. Like, I like that sort of stuff. But, I think sometimes we see maybe in modern society that maybe there's been a drop in creativity, maybe, or that there's less of an effort to be so. And I almost wonder if, just broadly speaking, right, not about generations, old, young, nothing like that, but just as we entered more of a digital age where everything's on a screen or things are kind of presented to you more instead of you having to fill it in, I wonder if by reading less, for example, we've lost that ability to think creatively or to exercise that part of our brain that allows that. And what I'm wondering from your point of view is, I don't know if there's a study out there, and you don't have to look it up, but like, I'm wondering if something like a comic book, right, might be beneficial to maybe even people of all ages, right, to not only have the escapism, but to develop that part of their brain where you're given part of it, right? You're kind of given the skeleton, but you're also kind of actively participating in it, I wonder if there's something there.
Oh, 100%. Like, so say, there's like several days just even within the past week where, I don't want to look at a screen right now. I don't want to be doing something, but I just want to chill.
Yeah.
And I can't just, I don't want to just sit here and have my mind idly off.
Right.
I want to be engaged in something, but I don't want to be looking at a screen.
Yeah.
Dude, this is it is that thing.
It's interesting. It's almost like you don't want stimulation, but you don't want to be numb either.
Yes.
It's almost like I don't know if cathartic's the right word, right? But it's like a therapeutic almost experience in a way.
Very. And don't get it twisted. You are not turning your brain off reading comics.
Sure.
Many of these comics are above me. They're books that, they beg to be reread. Once you know the characters, once you've seen it, then you can go back and understand the intricacies. One example is Planetary by Warren Ellis.
Okay.
Another example is Sandman. Mm-hmm. Sandman by Neil Gaiman is basically a story of a god, the god of sleep, Morpheus, and then he is, basically the stories are dreamlike. It's the best description of what it is to be in a dream that I've ever experienced.
This is cool. It almost sounds like Inception.
Yes.
But instead of being, I don't know, on this one maybe mission or project or guide that they had in the movie, it's almost like that's the medium in which the story is taking place, or that the action is occurring, and that the story is developing from one dream to the next, or where this character exists maybe.
Yes.
It's a really cool concept, actually.
Yeah, and I just once you get a little bit of it, you just want more and more and more. It becomes so addicting that it's like the stories. The problem that I'm running into is I'm reading so many of the best stories that if I read something that is not up to that level, it's
like disappointing.
Yeah, it's a little disappointing. Yeah. It's less fulfilling. And like a movie like Inception, which is excellent.
Sure.
Watching a lesser movie is kind of tough, but yeah, I'm very much into this hobby, and it's not something that has always been a part of my life.
Yeah.
Nerd stuff has always
nerd stuff has always
been there. And I brought a prop here just to illustrate this.
I'm excited to see what we're gonna get into. I have no idea what he's got in here.
So yeah, this is.
I remember this.
Okay, so I had I wanted to illustrate the fishing line. I don't know if this is on camera.
I can kind of pull it out here, maybe show them a little bit.
Basically, in high school, I thought it was cool to. I wanted to display. I've realized this, that bigger than all of this stuff. It's just I've always wanted to have a display, a collection, and I didn't realize that the comic books was going to be my thing. Star Wars was always my thing.
Yeah, you were big into Star Wars for sure.
The problem is the Star Wars mythology, the Star Wars story it's just one story. It's those 3 movies and then the prequels that's it. And comic books are this treasure trove of never-ending amount of stories. And I brought this out just to illustrate even in my 15, 16, 17-year-old days, I was wanting what I have now. If I'd known these type of things existed, it's literally coming from a perspective of ignorance, where I didn't have the exposure to comics that I wish I had, because I would have been in. I didn't realize what I was missing. And it's so unfortunate, but I'm glad I got to it now. But it's this is what I loved, this is what I had, but it's I've gone on to something else.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. I'll tease you a little bit here, but in a good way. So, seeing the ship, Slave One, right?
Yeah,
I got the name right? Yeah. So, I remember that used to hang in Daniel's bedroom, and in high school, I always thought Daniel had a pretty cool room, and you'll have to help me with the description here, but I believe you probably shown your viewers your room tour of your current setup, right? I'm guessing of your house or whatever.
Yeah.
But back in high school, I think you had this room that was painted green. I think
Lime
it was
green.
Kawasaki green or whatever, something like that.
Yep.
And you had Slave One. I don't know what other props you got in there, so I won't talk about too many yet. But you had these things in your room, and it wasn't excessive, I mean, I always remember from what I remember, there being like, I don't know, 5 or 6 things on display. And like most of them would stay up for a little bit and they'd rotate. That's what I remember. I could be off a little bit, but it's funny now to hear you say that like you always kind of wanted like your own space to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, I think your viewers probably know this, but if you don't, he kind of has the setup that he has in this room now for a while. But before, I think you had the different setup in the room upstairs.
Right.
Or whatever like that. And I remember the first time I saw the one upstairs, I was just like, wow, this is awesome. This is like nerd heaven. Like, this is totally like the man cave, you know, where you get to do your thing. And like, just seeing how you've taken that and then, you know, moved it down here, but just what you've been able to build, that resonates so true. And like, I guess I didn't know that you had that desire back then, but just seeing how you've evolved and built onto it. Again, I don't know that I know all the comic books. I have a full appreciation for all of them, but I definitely have an appreciation for how you've built this out and how it looks. It is awesome.
Well,
yeah.
I appreciate that, dude. And a lot of people have given me a lot of positive comments because, you know, I don't want it to look junky. Yeah. I want it to look clean. I want to appreciate, you know, what I have. And you can go overboard. And I'm borderline there now. But, you know, even in high school, like, you know, having, you know, I wanted to have a few, but it was important to me just because I wanted to be with those things because they were important to me, and I didn't really give a shit whether or not I cared nothing about whether somebody judged me for those things. Like, you know, I had girlfriends and, you know, they would come in there and I'm like, there was no shame.
Yeah. Well,
like, I had no shame.
You know what, though? And I don't want to cut you off. You go ahead and then I'll make my comment. Go ahead.
Well, it was just, it's like, and I think that's why I think so many people resonate with me and watch me is because this is part of who I am. These things represent how I feel or what I love and what's important. And I like being down here. It's like it's
your environment.
Yeah, it makes me feel good. And you know, not everybody gets that type of enjoyment from things like this, but so many of the people that watch and resonate with me, they get that same thing.
Oh yeah. And I know I'm segueing a little bit here, but I think for me that's one of the things that I've always admired most about you is that you've always never been scared to be yourself. You know, I think you went through a lot of different changes, mainly in high school, but like other times in your life too. But like, it was never like I'm being phony or I'm trying to be something that I'm not. It was just always like, oh, I'm going to go try this, right, or whatever. And that is the cool thing about you. You've never been scared to be who you are, you know. And I think that that's sort of the cool thing when I think about this room. When you talk about maybe it's kind of overboard or whatever, I don't think you're there yet, because the key word I see when I look around this is it's the appreciation of it. Yeah. I can see that you have the appreciation of it, you know. It's not when you look at these things like, oh, I got this and it can't be touched. It's nothing like that, but it's more just like, this is really cool. Yeah. Look at what this person was able to do, and like the character appreciation. Like, you've always been a big Star Wars fan, you know, historically or whatever. And just seeing like the Anakin over there, for example, right? Like, it's totally you. And again, segue point here. But I think I learned this a little bit too late in my life, or it's something I wish I'd learned earlier, that being yourself is the best thing that you can be. Yeah. Other people may not always like who you are, but if you are authentic, you will go so much further in life. Yeah. And
you recently did a YouTube channel where you talked about chemistry, cooking, gardening, basically a little bit of everything. And I was kind of I was very impressed by your videos. Thank you. Just the editing, and your passion was coming through. And I think, you know, we kind of talked about this off camera. It was like, you know, when I started being myself on camera and not giving a shit necessarily as how people perceive me as far as what I think they want of me. Right. I think more people came and started appreciating it. And I think with your YouTube channel and the things you were starting, I think you had that same thing where it was like you were putting your passions into this, and it's like people can take it or leave it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the big thing. You have to find not just what you like, but you have to kind of know who you are and be comfortable with yourself. And I think if you try to put something out there that's not perfectly in line with that, it sort of shows.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the thing that can be challenging, at least what I found, I don't know if you would agree, because I know we talked about this a little bit, but it's really a challenge when you're trying to sort of distill every little bit of who you are and put it on a camera.
Yes.
Because when you normally have a conversation like we are, you're talking with someone else in the room. When it's just you down here making video, I mean, you're looking at it, you know, your recording device, right? You're looking at that,
and
right, and you know, you're trying to just share your thoughts and everything. I think sometimes I guess maybe the core essence of who you are, what it's like to be around a person. Just for example, it's not always easy to convey that in a video, especially when you're starting out.
Yeah.
And you know, we talk about this some, like, I'm not the biggest comic book collector, but I try to follow your channel, you know, just supporting you, and like, I enjoy it, you know.
Thank you.
But I think you have grown into the role, but I think that's normal for almost anyone that makes videos or does YouTube or anything like that, you know. Not where you're changing who you are, but you learn to be more comfortable being on camera, because it's not a natural process.
No.
And I know that sounds so silly because it seems so simple. I'll set something up here, right? And I'll put it on, it'll be good. But I know even in my videos, like when I look back on a couple of them, I am totally being myself, but I'm also trying to be so professional and give the information that's 100% factual and not say something wrong on the chemistry side of things.
Right.
That it's not the same as me just coming to you and being sort of loosey-goosey, you know, where I'm just
we're
fully
just
relaxed.
spitballing.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I don't know, but I'm proud of you, man. I think you've done great with this.
It's interesting, like, because there's a lot of that with, as far as like comics, and you know, there's that gatekeeping of, though I don't want to say this is wrong. Well, technically, this isn't, you know, Sal Buscema's first cover, and I'm like, dude, I don't know, I don't care. Like, I like this book, I like to collect this. Like, and you from the chemistry perspective of, you know, some troll out there will technically the decadocahedron, and I'm like, fuck you. Like, I mean, it just doesn't, you know, who cares?
Yeah, and I think the thing that's sometimes unfortunate, like, you know, I mean, I don't know about your particular viewers. I'm guessing most of them are pretty good people and everything. But I think when there's your sense of humor coming through. Oh man, I miss hanging out with you. But I think that's the thing that gets lost sometimes. It's like, you know, when was it Sabashima?
Sal Buscema, yeah.
Sabashima, right? Like, maybe you didn't know that, but I think it's just one of those things, like, as you kind of keep building on the hobby, right? Or the interest or your knowledge base, right? Like, you're building on it. Maybe you don't know that. Maybe you don't need to specialize in it, but if someone has a comment, like, hopefully it's meant constructively, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the internet as a whole, like, no one individually, right? But has a tendency to kind of be like, oh, it should be this, or kind of harsh, and like sometimes tone gets lost too. But yeah, I see what you mean. It should just be like a journey, I would hope, right? Not just for you, but like people, right? Yeah. I think that gets lost too much today. You know, everyone's out there trying to learn, get better. We're all struggling with different things, right? Like, what's the point in being overly harsh on somebody, especially on something like that? You know what I mean? But
dude, you're too nice for the Sticky Goose viewership.
Maybe I am,
dude. But you're like the nicest person we've had on the channel ever. Maybe
I don't know if I'm too nice. I think I just think I've realized that, man, in general, life's pretty short.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And like I said, everyone is struggling with stuff. Sometimes you're on a high, sometimes you're on a low, but like tearing people down, you know, at the end of the day, honestly, like, unless someone is really in need of like corrective action where you're trying to help them, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of hurting yourself.
Yeah, when what about the whatnots? What about the whatnot comic book flippers, dude? They deserve to be crucified.
Whatever you say, pal.
We've got to destroy them.
Hey, man, you're the judge, jury, and executioner here. I know nothing. I'm just the guest in your world today.
Dude, I really appreciate you saying those things, because you're absolutely right. You know, negativity gets clicks. Yeah. Being that judge, jury, and executioner, that is some of the biggest channels. That is their like mantra. And people want that. And it's sad, but at the end of the day, like a conversation like we're having, conversations I've had with my dad, bringing him on here, and my my wife, and people seeing because this is who I really am. Like me talking to you right now, this is
us for 27 years.
Yeah, this is us. This is not a persona, and it's just it's good to show all aspects of yourself when you're doing
Yeah.
this, and I feel awesome that we're able to do this,
Yeah, same.
casually and have this conversation. I'd love to have you back on here.
Yeah, dude, I'd love to be back.
So what's the future for you on YouTube, you think? Are you gonna keep making videos, or?
I think so. I think so.
Sweet.
I think before I was a little bit focused on maybe the wrong thing, which was, I'm trying to build a channel, right? Or I'm trying to, I don't know, do something that seems like productive. But I think now the focus is getting back to where it should have been from the start, which is just putting things out there interesting to help educate people.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to like chemistry, and like it shouldn't be my job. If maybe not shouldn't be my job. Like, I hope I can help show you a side of chemistry that's interesting. But if it's not your cup of tea, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to convince you or whatever. Everyone's got their own passions, and that's cool, But I think for me, I'm really excited to maybe take some of the things I've learned in the lab actually the past couple of years and apply that to my channel, because there's a lot of things I've learned on the job that never exposed to in school, different things like that. So I'm excited. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If at any point in time you like this video, give the thumbs up. And if you like this video, subscribe for more. Thank you to the Godfather, aka Michael, for coming through. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you're staying safe and take care.